Imagine the Roman Empire at its greatest extent, stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. A quarter of the world's population lives under its rule. Its capital is a marvel of engineering and culture, where 1 million people from every corner of the known world live behind walls that seem eternal. This is Rome in 180 CE, at the peak of what historians would later call the Pax Romana, 2 centuries of relative peace and prosperity, unprecedented in human history. But everything is about to change. In a military camp on the empire's northern frontier, the great philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius lies dying. At his bedside stands his 19-year-old son, Commodus. Within hours, this young man will inherit not just an empire, but the weight of 200 years of success. The decisions he makes in the coming years will unravel generations of stability and set Rome on a path from which it will never fully recover. This is the story of how Rome's golden age ended not with an invasion or a plague, but with a choice. A father's impossible decision that would put his son in a position to destroy everything he had spent his life protecting. Consider Commodus's early life. Born into the purple, he was the first emperor's son to succeed to the throne since Titus a century before. By age 5, he was already accompanying his father on campaigns to the empire's northern frontiers. While other noble children might be forgiven their youthful indiscretions, Commodus's every action was scrutinized. He was, after all, the living future of Rome. The historical record shows a striking contrast between father and son. Where Marcus embraced philosophical study, finding meaning in Stoic principles even amid the hardships of constant warfare, young Commodus showed early signs of different inclinations. Contemporary sources tell us he preferred spectacle and physical displays to the intellectual pursuits his tutors championed. To understand Marcus's choice of heir, we need to look at how imperial succession had worked in the previous century. After the tumultuous reign of Domitian, Rome had enjoyed unprecedented stability under a series of rulers who would later become known as the 5 Good Emperors. This stability rested on an unusual pattern. Each emperor had chosen his successor through adoption, selecting the most capable man rather than his own son. When the elderly Nerva became emperor in 96 CE, he stabilized the crisis by adopting the capable military commander Trajan. Trajan in turn adopted Hadrian. When choosing his successor, Hadrian adopted Antoninus Pius, but with one condition, that Antoninus would in turn adopt both the young Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. Crucially, none of these emperors had adult sons when making their choice. Marcus Aurelius found himself in an unprecedented position. He had a biological son, and this complicated matters far more than simply choosing between merit and family. Marcus faced a complex political reality. If he named another heir, Commodus, as his biological son, would likely have been seen as too dangerous to live. Previous succession disputes had shown that even unwilling claimants could become rallying points for rebellion. In response, Marcus took practical steps. He took his son on campaigns at age 5, made him co-emperor at 15, and surrounded him with experienced counselors. These arrangements initially provided some stability, but after Marcus's death, Commodus quickly began to show signs of the ruler he would become. Instead of following his father's example of dutiful governance, Commodus found himself drawn to the spectacle of the games. What began as an interest in gladiatorial combat soon evolved into an obsession that would come to define his reign. The emperor's participation in the arena was unprecedented. Previous emperors had sponsored games, but none had personally entered the arena as a combatant. For each appearance, he would charge the imperial treasury 1 million sesterces, enough to feed thousands of Romans for a year. His battles were elaborate frauds. He fought against gladiators who were given wooden swords while he wielded steel, challenged wounded soldiers and disabled people who couldn't properly defend themselves, and hunted exotic animals from elevated platforms where they couldn't reach him. What appeared to be displays of courage were actually carefully choreographed spectacles, designed to feed his growing appetite for adoration while avoiding any real risk. As Commodus's reign progressed, his relationship with Rome's ancient institutions began to shift. The Senate, which had maintained a careful partnership of mutual respect with Marcus Aurelius, found itself increasingly humiliated. Senators were forced to attend the gladiatorial games and shout prescribed praises for the emperor's performances. Those who resisted often disappeared, as Commodus's paranoia led to repeated purges of the senatorial class. The Praetorian Guard, traditionally the emperor's protectors, were drawn into his theatrical world. Instead of maintaining security, they were ordered to participate in his elaborate gladiatorial shows, their traditional military dignity sacrificed for the emperor's entertainment. Their commander, Perennis, tried to restrain Commodus's excesses, only to be executed when the emperor suspected a plot. By 190 CE, Commodus's behavior had moved beyond mere excess. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana and ordered all months of the year renamed after his various titles. The state treasury, carefully maintained by his father, was drained to fund increasingly elaborate games and spectacles, when a devastating fire struck Rome in 192 CE, adding to the city's mounting problems of food shortages and political instability. Commodus seemed more concerned with planning his theatrical performances than addressing the crisis. His identification with Hercules became all-consuming. The massive bronze colossus that stood near the Colosseum, originally built by Nero and modified by previous emperors, was altered again. Commodus had its head replaced with his own likeness and added the attributes of Hercules, the bronze club and lion skin. He even added an inscription boasting of his prowess as conqueror of 1,000 gladiators. The ancient priesthoods, once symbols of Roman religious tradition, were forced to incorporate his personal cult into their ceremonies. The final crisis began when Commodus announced his plans to inaugurate the new year of 193 CE, not as consul, but as a gladiator. The thought of Rome's emperor, dressed in gladiatorial gear, leading the sacred January 1st ceremonies from the gladiators' barracks instead of the Capitoline temple, was a step too far even for his closest advisors. The plot against Commodus grew from his increasing paranoia and violent tendencies. He had already executed numerous senators, and his trusted advisors knew their positions and lives were precarious. His chamberlain Eclectus had seen the emperor's death lists. His mistress Marcia, despite being one of his most trusted confidants, knew of his habit of turning suddenly against close associates. The Praetorian prefect Latus had witnessed how Commodus's previous favorites had met brutal ends. The immediate trigger came when these three discovered their own names on a new execution list. Marcia, who had long enjoyed Commodus's trust, administered poison in his meat during dinner. However, Commodus vomited up the poison, likely due to his excessive drinking. Now suspicious and making threats, he created an even more urgent situation for the conspirators. They quickly turned to Narcissus, a powerful wrestler who was promised his freedom. The wrestler found Commodus weakened from the failed poisoning attempt in his bath and strangled him. For an emperor who had so carefully crafted his public image as a reborn Hercules, commanding statues of himself to be erected throughout Rome, showing him with Hercules' lion skin and club, death came not in glorious combat, but in the private confines of his bath, at the hands of those he had trusted most. Looking back at Commodus's reign, we see a pivotal moment in Roman history. The Pax Romana, that long period of relative stability, ended not with barbarian invasions or natural disasters, but with an emperor's obsession with his own glory. The year following his death would see 5 different men claim the imperial throne, beginning a new era of civil war and instability. The careful political balance that had sustained Rome's golden age had been broken, and the empire would never fully recover its former stability. Next time, we'll explore the Year of the 5 Emperors, a single year of civil war that would change the Roman Empire forever. And if you found yourself wondering about the great father whose legacy Commodus rejected, you can find that story in our episode on Marcus Aurelius. Subscribe to join us for more journeys through history's defining moments.